pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Number 2, we will call to order the July 18th, 2024 Village Board meeting. Number 3, roll call shows all trustees are present. Grace will be on the telephone. Staff is all present. Erin has been excused. And Attorney Rich is standing in for Ashley. Number 4, agenda changes. Are there any? 5, consent agenda. A, June 20th, 24. Regular board meeting minutes. B, June 20, 2024. Committee of the whole meeting minutes. C, licenses and permits as presented. And D, presentation of accounts and other claims against the village. Are there any questions? If not, I would need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the regular board meeting minutes, the cow minutes, and licenses and permits.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Grace?
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. 6, pre-registered citizens to be heard. You have a limit of 5 minutes. State name and address. Comments limited to 5 minutes. And according to our state statutes. Are there any? Okay. 7, committee reports. A, library board. Jane or Ally? You going to report
Oh.
later or no?
I probably most of it's going to be in your
Pretty
report,
much.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. B, senior activities. It is in the packet. 8, unfinished business from previous meetings. There is none. 9, new business. A, presentation from Hawkins Ash on the 2023 audit.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Amber Ebert from Hawkins Ash CPAs, and I'll be going through the 2023 summary financial. So to start, this year we issued an unmodified audit opinion, which is the best opinion that can be achieved. And we just like to mention that the financial statements present fairly and are materially correct. This year we proposed 38 adjusting journal entries, and for comparison there were 39 last year, so a slight improvement. We just suggest to continue to ask questions as needed and keep trying 1 or 2 entries every year. We don't ever expect to see 0 because there are some entries that we prefer to record and not have our clients record them. For the communication with those charged with governance and management advisory comments, of the 38 journal entries, 11 of them were material related to property tax roll, special assessments, deferred revenues, capital outlay, capital assets, due tos, due froms, transfers, cash, equity, debt, unearned revenue, and lease receivable, which that's a new standard recently within the last year or 2. And then we had 10 management advisory comments, and there were 11 last year. So 2 of them were resolved this year, original and final budgeted amounts, and the recording auditor journal entries. And then we added 1 new one, which is a FYI entry that there is a new GASB coming out next year for the compensated absences. So that's just something we added to all of our reports just to let our clients know. For the general fund revenues, the top 3 categories were taxes at 40%, intergovernmental at 33%, and public charges for services at 13%. And for the general fund expenditures, public safety at number 1 with 37%, general government at 27%, and public works at 22%. And then for the debt service fund, for principal and interest restricted, this did decrease about $37,000 due to no new debt and debt payments being made. For the special revenue funds, we have restricted for subdivision park fees. This increased $4,000 this year. Housing and neighborhood conservation remained the same at $32,000. Wisconsin Development Fund Grant decreased about 15,000 from last year. The ARPA fund increased about 7,200 from last year. And then we have assigned for library, this increased 16,000. The capital projects for assigned, we have capital improvements, which decreased 381,000, which is now at a zero fund balance for the year. TID number 6, which increased about 44,000. And then we have unassigned at TID number 3, which increased about 29,000, still sitting at a negative of about 212,000. TID 4 sitting at a negative about 171,000, but an increase of 73,000 from last year. TID 5 sitting at a negative 23,000, which is a slight decrease of 1,400 from last year. And then TID 6, which increased and is now sitting at a zero fund balance. Overall, the capital project funds decreased about 218,000. For the water and wastewater, the net investment in capital assets decreased about 41,000 for the year. And then we have restricted for debt retirement. This decreased about 189,000 for the year. The replacement, which increased about 37,000 for the year. And then WRS pension, which has a zero fund balance for the year due to it being a liability this year, which just varies. So that decreased about 111,000 this year. And then unrestricted is sitting at about 1.8 million and increased about 585,000 for the year. So overall, the total proprietary funds is sitting at about almost 10.6 million for the year. And that's all I have. Any questions?
I have one.
Yep.
Just out of curiosity. You said that there was 38 adjusting entries this year, and that was one less than last year. Then you said that there was entries that you always have entries because there's ones that you want to make. How many are the fixed number that you make?
I would say between 4 to 10 that we do our own.
Okay. Just curious.
Just kind of depending on the year, but yeah, I would say between 4 and 10 that they would be WRS and then any like capital asset adjustments for depreciation and stuff like that.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yep.
I see that we identified 11 items warranting an advisory comment, and those are in the comment letter.
Yep.
Where is the letter?
It would be, I think the packet would be about 20 pages long. It's those charged with governance letter.
It's not in the packet. We can send that out if you would like, along with the rest of the attachments. It's,
I was just curious what some of them were, but if
Yep.
it's in a packet, I can check that out later too.
yeah,
Thank
we
you.
can send that out to the board members, the full audit. It was too large to put in the packet.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to thank you for allowing Hawkins Ash to be your auditors again. Thank you.
B, discussion and possible action on ordinance O-8-24 to update and adopt the comprehensive plan.
So although we officially were approved the final document last time, we need to have an official ordinance adoption according to our consultant. So we would need to adopt the ordinance.
So you just need a motion to approve that.
Yep, there we did.
You just need a motion to approve this. I'll make a motion to approve, where'd it go? O-8-24, adopting the comprehensive plan.
A second.
Roll call, Jim?
Aye.
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 Grace?
It is.
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. C, discussion and possible action on amending commercial club temporary handicap parking authorization, Legion's 100th anniversary.
And I'll take that one. So, a couple meetings ago, you, approved to put out, temporary signs for handicap parking for their event that they had on, they were supposed to have on June 22nd, but it rained, so they wanted to, postpone it to July 27th, which is 2 weekends from now, and they're requesting the same as they did before.
So we just need a motion for this.
I'll make a motion to amend the commercial club parking or temporary handicap parking to, you said July 27th,
Yes.
2024.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried. D, discussion and possible action on Appleton Alliance Opera House lease renewal.
So we got a letter from Appleton Alliance wanting to basically renew their lease. If the board wants to go forward with it, it'll have, a new lease drawn up by our attorneys and brought to another meeting for official approval, but
Is there any reason not to? I mean, we haven't had any problems with it.
I don't see a reason not to. I think, in my opinion, they're updating it. They've been paying for updates, and we don't have funds even in the next probably 10 years or so to potentially pay for any large update to it, with the Main Street reconstruction and, you know, the parks that we're trying to update it. It might be a little bit before we would have funds potentially.
So they're just really wanting to keep the same terms, just, yeah,
Extend.
yeah. If you could bring that back to us, do you need a motion or anything to, or just
Not really.
direction to do that?
We could, so I guess the question was if we wanted to just amend the current contract or we'd want to draw up a whole new one.
I guess it's deemed legal, does that matter?
Does the current one have like the incremental increase built in, or is it just a fixed amount?
A fixed amount.
And how long was that originally?
It was 3 years.
Is everyone okay with that, to direct Nathan to bring that back?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
okay without making any changes to it, too.
Okay.
I think it's in our best interest.
Okay. If there are no other questions, we will move to E. R-16-24, amending personnel manual part-time vacation.
Well, there's a memo in the packet kind of explaining why we're looking at doing this right now. I guess, a while ago, the village took away the vacation, along with, sick and, holiday for, the part-time employees, and told the library board that they could do an amending our manual themselves for only their employees, which, according to the league, that's not the case. So the way to fix that potential issue would be basically adopting the vacation into our part-time employee schedules. This would affect 3 other employees other than the current employees that have the current PTO through the library right now.
So not a big expense.
No, not compared to what, I mean, right now you have the library employees all having PTO based on what we were told. And basically, you're talking 2 public works part-time employees, and then 1, the court clerk would be the other one that would be eligible for part-time.
The only question I had after reading that stuff was, do we also have to consider holiday and sick time?
No, because
It's
those
just the PTO?
those aren't allowed, those aren't given to part-time employees at all.
So you did, okay, all right.
They went to PTO and they use that across the board for anything.
Okay.
That was the difference.
Do we, is there a handbook define what the difference between part-time and permanent part-time is?
Yeah, it's basically over 20 hours and a kind of set schedule, like consistent. Where we have a few employees who are casual and like once a week for 4 hours, that wouldn't be considered because they're not here enough. And then we do have seasonal employees like the rec that are categorized differently, and interns as well are categorized differently, so it does differentiate between.
Okay. I would just make sure that you don't add this in so that way our seasonal employees end up being covered under, as a permanent part-time under the definition.
Yep.
Otherwise, I'll make a motion to approve R-16-.
One real quick
Oh, yeah,
question.
more.
One quick question.
Okay.
So anybody that's like intern, that kind of thing, so I don't need to abstain for this, is what
No.
you're saying? Okay.
There's no intern is acceptable.
I just wanted to be
Yeah.
sure that I wasn't crossing any boundaries I shouldn't do.
No.
So, okay. Then I will second the motion.
Roll call, Jim?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Grace?
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. F, discussion and possible action on the CSM of parcel 240-111-600 and 240-111-701.
So this is basically just redrawing lines. There are currently 2 lots. The CSM is moving the line over few hundred feet. It was recommended to approve by the planning and zoning board.
Any questions? If there are no questions, I would need a motion.
Make a motion to approve the CSM on parcels 240-111-600 and 240-111-701.
A second. Roll call, Jim?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Grace?
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. G, discussion and possible action on Z-1-24, property rezone of parcel 240049900 from R1 single-family residential to R2 two-family residential.
This was also recommended for approval by the planning and zoning board. The rezone, the surrounding parcels are all actually zoned multifamily. That's the orange in the map below. The yellow is currently R1. The homeowner on the R1 property wants to build a second house that's ADA compliant so he could live in it, and then he was going to rent the house out closer to the road to someone else. So he wants to rezone it to R2. They would have a shared access driveway.
Any questions?
You just need a motion.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve Z-1-24, the property rezone of parcel 240049900 from R1 single family to R2 two-family residential.
Second.
Roll call, Jim?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Grace?
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. H, discussion and possible action on O-7-24, amending downtown zoning code section 44-155 uses.
This was also recommended for approval from the planning and zoning committee after the public hearing. The changes are basically removing the street-facing portion from mixed-use residential in the downtown zoning district. This wouldn't affect any current properties. This would only affect properties in the future that would wish to change it to have residential housing in the first level.
What about the lodging house? Isn't that falling right into like almost like mixed use resident? I mean,
The lodging house,
it'd be like a hotel downtown?
I'm guessing that's what they mean by it. I don't know if this portion of the ordinance is necessarily gonna survive our rezone that we're gonna end up doing. It's just, this is something to get us by in the meantime. I think realistically, you don't wanna have, we have a few, parcels downtown that currently have a small storefront in the front and then some residential in the back. Like the old Fuzzy Paws is one. And there's been discussion from someone about trying to get residential in their downtown or in their first level, which we'd rather not have.
So this would make the current one that has a front-facing business in
It'd be fine,
it would still be allowed.
yeah. They just wouldn't be able to, basically, no one new could basically do one.
Okay, so it's not gonna impact somebody who already has it, but anybody who wanted to do it moving forward,
They wouldn't be able to.
okay.
And then the other changes was removing the public school portion out, and then changing the lifestyle from conditional use to permitted. Yeah.
Any other questions? Otherwise, we would need a motion.
Well, so I still have one last, so you have the lodging house, and then you also have hotel and motel. So obviously that has some other meaning.
I couldn't tell you. This was
Okay.
developed before my time.
I was part of the group that helped develop this. This was the East Central Planning, I'm gonna say this wrong.
Regional planning.
Regional Planning helped us with this. And they gave us like a list of examples.
Okay.
Like there's no distillery, obviously downtown right now. There's, like when it says lodging house, hotel, it was, they wanted to give it where it was either permitted or it was conditional. So either it's, they could simply, they could occupy a place downtown, or they could have to apply for a conditional use permit. So like a lodging house, it was that they needed to come to like planning and zoning and ask for a conditional use permit based on whatever the business is. So then it would go through approval. Yeah, did I explain that right? I mean,
Yeah,
how it
I
works?
think he's just asking the difference between a hotel motel and a lodging house.
I don't know,
if
these
I
were
could-
examples were
right,
given to
yeah.
us at the time,
Bed and breakfast, maybe a lodging house.
perhaps.
No, that's already in there. So,
That's what I'm trying to understand what a lodging house is. It's just, if we're gonna say it's, it's an option for downtown.
Possibly in a bigger community, you would maybe see that, where you would have a home and someone would allow someone to come in and stay with them.
Well,
I would
so
think that's what it pertains to.
my concern is it sort of sounds like that would fall under like that Airbnb kind of thing, and I don't think we really want people.
A lodging house is where people can rent rooms, especially one that is not a hotel or inn. So if you have a house that you can rent a room in, it's a lodging house.
Mhm.
That's the difference between a hotel, a motel, and a lodging house.
So if somebody wanted to
But we
do,
couldn't have that because we don't allow residential.
could upstairs.
You could upstairs,
Yeah,
technically.
But, I mean, yeah, so, okay. All right, okay. I guess that's a good question. I just want to make sure we didn't end up doing something where
Mhm.
somebody could take advantage and
Any other
unintended.
questions? Okay, I would need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve O-7-24, amending the downtown zoning code.
I'll second that.
Roll call, Jim?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Grace?
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. I, discussion and possible action on Alonzo Park Playground and splash pad award of contract.
So the bids came in, there's a letter in the packet from our engineering team from Architecture. The bids were within $1,400 of each other. The lowest bid is Vinton Construction Company at $924, $278.55.
Does anyone have questions?
So I think probably be better now to talk through finances. So as of right now, we are initially promised the $500,000 from the state. We did get notification last week that we'll be getting potentially up to another $400,000, but it has to be matched. So, and basically right now our total cost estimation is 1.48. So $1,489,854.58. So half of that would be covered by the state. We still have some contingencies potentially that might pop up during construction that could alter that fund, but we would have to cover the other half. Basically half of that number is about $744,000. $300,000 of that is going to be covered by ARPA. $256,000 of will also be covered by our CIP, leaving about $188,000, in which the village would have to potentially either get through fundraising or to take out a loan to pay for over potentially a 2 or 3 year payment. So the way I have it structured in our debt right now is we can take it in 3 years. We could borrow funds from water and sewer, so we're not paying an interest rate, and basically do that to just help initially fund the project.
So you're looking for a motion for approval of the...
This would just be the approval of the contract, the Vinton.
For Vinton Construction?
Yep.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the contract for the Alonzo Park Playground splash pad to Vinton Construction Company. You need the amount on there or not?
Yeah, it's $920.
Yeah, in the amount of $924,278.55.
I'll second.
Roll call, Jim?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Grace?
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. J, discussion and possible action on Alonzo Park Construction Administration proposal.
So the administration proposal is for having Architecture come and oversight the installation of the project. That was already included in that initial estimate I just gave you guys for the costs. So we can fund it. It's better to have someone there who actually knows what they're doing with the installation of the splash pad too and playground. So
Since we already approved that, do we need to... we just
you
have to have a
didn't
motion
approve
to
it. You approved
We
the
approved the
contract.
funds.
There's a different. Yeah, we just talked about when I was talking about the funds. It incorporated everything.
Okay.
All of these next ones are all incorporated in that initial financial discussion, but they'll have to be approved separately.
Any questions? If not, I would need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the Alonzo Park
Sorry,
Construction.
I have a quick question. Sorry.
Yep.
Thank you. I see that this is gonna start in the fall and conclude by the spring. Like, is there an official start date?
We won't get the official start date until we meet with the Vinton Construction Company. They'll do a kickoff meeting and then they'll tell us a timeline for when they're going to start.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve the Alonzo Park Construction Administration proposal from Architecture.
I'll
Second that. Jane. Sorry.
Roll call, Jim?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Grace?
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. Okay, discussion and possible action on Alonzo Park splash pad equipment approval.
So rather than having the bidding, or the company, one of the construction companies purchase these for us and mark them up, we decided we were gonna purchase them ourselves to save some of that money. So the splash pad quote was basically with the splash pad and the playground. Each of these are basically designed so there really wasn't a secondary quote. This quote is also kind of bidded out through the, there's a bidding company that does, where is it? Sourcewell, sorry. So. They also have to all be American-made products because of the grant we have. So that's why we are kind of limited on our options.
Any questions? We would need a motion.
Make a motion to approve the Alonzo Park splash pad equipment, and this is the 175. Yep, 75,000, and the amount of $175,492.28.
A second. Roll call, Jim.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Grace?
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. L, discussion and possible action on Alonzo Park playground equipment award of contract.
This one is also pre-designed and basically is what it is at this point. These were our options, so total amount $300,583.75.
I'll make a motion to approve playground equipment award to it's Power Play LT, is that right? In the amount of $300,583.75.
I'll second that.
Roll call, Jim.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Grace?
Aye.
Motion carried. M, discussion and possible action on trail routes and options.
So this is loaded on the website. It's in the additional documents page if you want to pull that up. So basically, we hired on Airs to kind of come up with some estimates with a few different route options in order to kind of see where those prices would come in at. We have Melissa Ayers here, and she can kind of walk you through kind of some of the thoughts we have.
Well, thank you. I'm looking, I have them on my phone, so I just want to read them through. We've had a lot of discussions. Our team is also helping on the planning and design for kind of downtown thoughts, preparing for 25 and 26 and doing a master plan, which obviously is more of a 10 to 20 year plan and thought process for moving forward. But some of the things that we've talked about and had some community engagement was different paths and ways to connect into downtown and ensuring that the new path that the county's putting in is connected and aligns with the downtown and ideally brings more people in to access the community and stop and visit. So with those ideas, we've originally started talking about what I would call the pink path. If anyone's color challenged, let me know, but that's the path. That would go up and sort of behind the alley, come onto Nash, go through the alley and come down Mill and then connect back into the park. Then the light blue path would be the one that goes downtown, really backs the downtown buildings in the creek. And then the green or yellowish path is the one that has the kind of fancy proposed bridge. It would go along sort of by the fishing pier, cross over, and then enter some of the, we'd have to work through some details with the bank, but would go into some of the land the village owns, do a bridge, and then still connect back to the other side. The dark blue part of the path, which you would see through the park, is going to stay the same no matter what. We need to ensure that we're connecting to the county path. And just as a quick reminder for everyone, I think, the county couldn't put the path through on the road due to downtown and parking, and we'd lose too many parking spots, and there were concerns. So the whole point is trying to figure out how we make those connections from the 2 yellow stars on the map to ensure people can kind of go through the village and find a pleasant way to do so. So when you look at those areas and those kind of bids, we prepared looking through costs to do so. There's a couple other things that probably have to happen at some point for you all, but that'll be part of our master plan. That I just quickly want to mention is the stream potentially needs some reconstruction, and the parking lot where the light blue path would go, potentially it'll need to be redone at some point. We could see some cost savings if we were to go the light blue route in doing some of those things all at the same time, but obviously that's a big ask. So in just looking at the 3 paths, the green or the big bridge path is probably the most expensive. Obviously the largest expense, and building a huge bridge to cross the creek is obviously a big deal. So that's why the cost is so high. So that's what I would call option 2, but the green path. But I want to start there because if we're, maybe that's, sorry, I want to make sure I'm getting old eyes here. But the green path, which is option 1, is the most expensive. We bid it, or not bid it out, but did all of our kind of, based on current projects and prices on what we're looking at right now, and put in a rather large contingency just because over the last year and a half, prices have fluctuated. Normally we'd put a 10 to a 20% contingency on this, but prices have been so wild. We wanted to ensure if this isn't something that's going to happen immediately, or you're making better decisions with a larger contingency. So that's the highest priced project, and that is just for the trail. So there's a small component of engineering, which is about 20% of all these costs as well, that would need to be done. And that's on the high end. We're also using that depending on if our team's engineering it, I'm sure there's some cost savings that we could look through, but we wanted to be realistic. So this solely is just the construction cost of these 3 trails. It doesn't include engineering, it doesn't include the creek, and it doesn't include the parking lot. So I know there's a lot of variables there. Does anyone have questions on those other things before I kind of just dive into the 3 costs on the trails? So then option 2, it's kind of continuing to move up, would be the light blue path. That's the one that goes behind the building, along the creek, kind of creates a community space. That would be then the second most expensive option. So we're looking at all-in costs, $1 million for the green, about $659,000 for the blue. And then the third option is the pink, and that would be doing some reworking. The big concern with the pink and why the costs, obviously that seems like it might be a fairly easy option because of the alley. The cost is still about $558,000. There's a very large contingency and what if in there, because currently the alley allows for bike and mostly car traffic though, because it's 2-way. So we really have to think through if we're going to put in a full-on trail. Are we taking out some parking? Are we doing 1-way traffic? Or what our thoughts are on how that might look. So could that cost come down? There's probably no question about it. It just depends on, we really have to think through the design. We didn't dive into a ton of details, and we went on the more conservative high end, thinking about if you're going to have 1-way traffic, are you putting in bollards or a concrete barrier or something like that if we're encouraging high bike traffic in the area. Or walking, for example, if we're trying to make the connectivity on that trail. So those are kind of the basics. I can provide more details. One of the big thoughts, regardless of which route we go, is that we take the corner and create some sort of potential bike parking. We've seen along the trail in other places, encouraging people to stop and come into the community. And that's, if you can see the blue little bike on the corner there, the thought is within the land the village owns and the tribute there, we'd make some modifications continue to have a tribute there, but think about some ways to redesign that space and area so it's more usable, friendly for bikes and people stopping and encouraging them to come into the community.
What's in your numbers that's not in the numbers that were just on the screen? Because you said 500,000 and it was 171 on the screen.
The dark blue is a part of each of the quotes,
Okay.
Yes.
because that's.
Oh, okay,
always
so we
been
have
part
the.
of-
That
so
has
we're
to
just-
happen,
okay.
yeah.
But that's fixed, that's.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, so I was giving you all in numbers, so I guess if you remove the dark blue, which is gonna happen either way, then we're looking at like, green is almost 700, the light blue is 300, and the pink is at 171.
Okay. So what were the thoughts on, okay, so if you go through the light blue, you're still going down that alleyway, or down that stretch of, it's vehicular traffic down that ramp,
Yep, the
right?
little alley.
So you're still gonna be combined use, is that the idea? And
Yeah.
the same
it
thing
would-
the same question applies to the pink too.
Right, that, it's a lot smaller, of an area, but yes, and, long-term, the thought is, in our 20-year plan, we'd figure out some way, especially when the bridge gets, because I think the Nash Street Bridge is probably one of the next ones in the next 5 to 10 years to get redone or get some updates. Am I
Yeah.
wrong on
Mill.
that? What?
Mills.
Mills for
Street.
Mill Street,
Okay.
yeah.
But then Nash is probably before, it's still before 2040, right?
I don't know, I
I
think,
thought it was within 16 years, that might be
Yeah.
my error, but in our 20-year plan, the thought is we would redesign that to be a better, how do we connect to the fishing side? There's a handful of grants that we'd potentially look into, tied to many, because the 20-year plan will have a handful of different design options and thoughts on the master plan for the downtown areas. We'd fix that, but it would be a lot more minimal to answer your question than the alley. We'd have to have very distinct through the entire portion of the alley, a very distinct divide just because so many cars go through there as a thoroughfare regularly
Okay.
than we would on the small blue portion. But yes, and that one would be a lot easier to do just because of the grade change anyway. It'd probably be easier to make a nice little path and do some more signage. And the village does own that portion, so I'm not as worried about it from a safety perspective, but it's still a concern.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions?
Are we impacting parking on the back here?
On the blue or the
light blue
pink?
path? Well, I assume on the pink, we're gonna impact some of the parking, but, on the blue, are we getting close enough to the creek where we're not really impacting a lot of parking, or are we impacting that lot considerably?
Well, so that, we have not fully redesigned. We have a very preliminary design right now on what the parking lot could look like.
Okay.
There's probably gonna be an impact to parking. The goal is to not do it. We have not done a full redesign of the parking lot yet. I guess to answer that question, the pink, we're definitely gonna impact, we believe, one of those whole blocks of parking, so probably at
Okay.
least 10 stalls will be lost. In the blue area, I guess right now, based on very preliminary designs, is my hope is we maybe, technically, I guess the one thing I wanna clarify is, there's probably unofficially a lot of parking spots there that shouldn't be back there, or where people park right now. So I think the most we've counted when we've been back down there on 5 different occasions is 14 cars. Of those, at least 5 are parked, not in legal parking spaces. So when you talk about losing parking, if you're talking about technically where there is parking, the answer would be no, because a lot of people park in places that really isn't a parking space anyway. And then we need to, ensure through this process, like Claire's here tonight, for example, she has 2 parking spaces on her building that we'll have to work through some details on how, or at least one for sure, her tenant parks in. There's like an access point that kind of goes through village property to get to her property and someone parks on. So we haven't fully laid out those details. There's been one design that MSA did previously. From that perspective, it's just the exact same parking that's there, and we can probably make it all work. I think a lot of us agree that it's just a really hard space to design, and there's probably no great parking access back there. So we have some thoughts on if there was to be the trail to go through, how could we think about a better design and layout? And there'd obviously have to be some partnerships, because it's a private property. Most of the parking lot's actually private property.
So the green, would it be the pedestrian bridge, which I know is a pipe dream sort of thing?
They could do, yeah.
But are there any funding or grant opportunities that are potential out there that could help defray that cost to us?
For sure, so there's, and we haven't really talked about those that kind of come out of the planning, but there's grants through DNR for access. And so one of those things is, again, becomes on how we look at some of the designs. You know, there's grants for fishing access, so if we added an additional, let's say the bridge had a small bump out for fishing, well then we could potentially apply to cover some of that funding. There's some rural dollars that are out there that we could talk about that are grants, some are low interest loans. So our hope and thought is, depending on what you decide, either way, we are gonna definitely, and we have to have some discussions with the county, but definitely look at grant funding to cover a portion of it. One of the grants allows up to 50%, and we can start talking about major trail connections and thinking about long-term how this could connect to the wheel wash. I think there's a lot of opportunity for that. What does it exactly look like? I mean, they're all grants and it changes every year.
And why I look at the green is because there's this huge piece of property that's just not being utilized. It's village property,
Yep.
and we're not utilizing it. And that would be potential bike parking, potential shady area, potential, there'd be a lot, you know, that isn't necessarily a recreational park, but more of a green space park.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about, do you put in a small, you know, could that be a small little concert area or a handful of other things, you know, in the 20 to 30 year plan of what this could look like and that space could look like and how you get there. No question. I think the hard part becomes when you take things in pieces, and all communities have to do this. I was in local government for 17 years before I came to the dark side on consulting, and you know, we talk about the creek restoration, we talk about the parking lot and the trails, and when we're sort of, because they are separate individual things, it's really hard to say, like, do we package it all together, because you all don't have $2 million to right now to make that decision and say, let's move forward and make it happen, so how do we take it into chunks and pieces? But the answer, I guess, is there's no question we're gonna go after every grant possible to minimize the costs.
Because then that doesn't take away parking from anybody. That doesn't, you know, from what I'm seeing on this, you're actually on the east side by the dam, and then the trail crosses then at a little bit different area, which is a little bit, you're not dealing with 4 lanes of traffic, you're just dealing with, you know, the north-south traffic.
Right.
Not that I want to spend more money than we have to, but I just, all of, and the pink, I'm not crazy about it all. I live fairly close to this, and when I see even cars or anybody coming out of that alley to turn onto Nash, the visibility isn't wonderful there, especially if there's cars parked on Nash. They have to almost creep out into the intersection. And I fear that if we have a trail there, we're not only getting rid of parking in that block by the Bethlehem Lutheran School, but we'd also need to eliminate some parking on Nash because we would need visibility.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that one is the least safe,
Mhm.
or has a lot more things we need to think about. That's why, like I said, you know, it's the lowest cost option because we know we can make it happen easier. But there's definitely a lot of issues, and we haven't done full engineering design into this. I mean, on the blue, to your point, I think before we could move it. You know, could we think about, do we cross only once? I think there's a lot of options to think about how we rework some of this to ensure safety is key. Same on the pink. We'll have to have a lot of discussions to just think about. We've walked all of this multiple times to figure out best options. We've had the engineers out to ensure, you know, a lot of this is feasible.
Because even the alley and Pine Street is a wonky intersection as well. It's not a perfectly perpendicular intersection.
But there's
Yeah.
space.
There's,
A lot of
yeah, but it's weird because
Well,
there's
right.
then it turns into one way, and now it's so yeah.
I guess my concern too is looking at, so financially, some of the other ones are the other routes if it was something that needed to get done by the time that we construct Main Street reconstruction, those other routes without any help are gonna be very, they're not gonna work without taking a loan out to increase, I mean, you'd have to increase taxes in order to do it.
And if you're putting money into pink, people are just gonna they're just gonna go through the downtown then.
I've been thinking this the whole time. I mean, I
They're just
bike,
gonna go through the
I
downtown.
bike every day, and I wouldn't take any of these routes. I mean, if I was on my bike and the routes were there, I wouldn't take any of them. I would just keep going right down Main Street if I was biking. That's assuming that I know the area, right? I mean, because you're only talking about one long block, and then you're right back to the Opera House, and you go through the parking lot, and then you're right back. You go through the Opera House parking lot, and you're right back in with everything else. Because I currently bike right through there, right through that same corridor. I would never even consider biking around the other way, or even on the light blue or the yellow. I mean, it just wouldn't even occur to me. So just.
Except that's just you, and you don't have little kids
Yeah.
biking with you, and that's the difference I think we need
Yeah.
to consider. I mean, it's one thing for
And-
an adult to do
And it's
it.
really the only option right now.
No, I agree.
Right?
I'm
mean,
just saying,
when
I think I would
kids were
be,
little, I biked them right through there too.
I agree with you, but I think, and because we've lived here our whole lives, but I think that even no matter when, now or even when we redo the downtown, I wouldn't want to be biking there with 5, 6-year-olds,
No.
7-year-olds.
So,
On the blue path, is there, I mean, I know you guys walked it, is there a concern with that creek retaining wall? Is that baked into the,
It is not built in.
it's not built in, okay.
No, I mean, there's two pieces to that, and Nathan, that's probably more you than me. You know, the creek at some point from where I'd say the potential bridge is, really the land that the village owns, but from the potential bridge to Nash, if you're using this picture here, or the proposed bridge, I'm sorry, you know, a restoration probably needs to happen.
Well, that's not the part I was thinking about. I was thinking, when you go down the ramp and then you're taking that left and then you're taking the hard right, that stretch right there is, I mean, my kids go down there and fish. It's starting to crumble back in there too. I mean, it's cut back underneath and.
Yeah, oh, so like where the
wall
dog,
is like, deteriorating.
Yeah.
yeah, the whole, I
Washing
mean,
away.
really, the whole creek
It's-
thing is
it's-
deteriorating. And I can pull up those numbers. We did send a number to look at that, to Nathan, you know. What's weird is like, if we redid the parking lot, cause you're having so many deterioration issues, and the creek, then putting in the blue path makes the most sense. The problem is, now you're doing all three things,
Yeah.
and it's really expensive. But if you were looking at a long-term, what's your best option? It's the blue and the full creek restoration and redoing the parking lot. Because then we can redo signage, we can have a cool community space back there and sort of make it all connect. You know, short-term, if we're doing it in pieces, your lowest cost is pink, figuring out the creek whenever we can, and then figuring out the parking lot when we can. The one big question is, you know, being prepared for 2026 for the actual road to be closed. Does that parking lot need to be redone or modified or fixed before then? So what are our things we're doing? Is it creek, parking lot, trail, parking lot, creek, all three at the same time? That's your biggest cost. You'd have to borrow for it. It sounds like, you know, what grants are we applying for and how are we packaging it? And, you know, that's a hard decision to make, and you'll have to kind of think. We can think through, and I can talk through some of that. So the creek restoration, I think, about $300,000. The parking lot, $250, $300, depending on which route we go, maybe less. So if you package it all in, 1.2, 1.5, maybe we could get some cost savings if we do all three at once. So somewhere between $1 million and 1.5 if we did it all at the same time. But I mean, that's all very. We haven't engineered it. We don't know what FEMA is gonna say about the creek. Our goal there could range from $30,000 to $70,000 if FEMA and DNR get upset. The goal would be to do the minimal possible so we don't have to disturb any of that. That's where then I struggle to tell you the range changes, right? And unfortunately, if any of us could guess DNR or FEMA, we'd all go also pick our lotto tickets out tonight. So, it's a tough choice to make, and it's a very interesting position we're in, because a lot of it's based on, you know, which part do we do first?
So the parking that would need to be eliminated in alley one would be all of that angle parking along Bethlehem? Is that how I understand this, Nathan?
Potentially, yeah.
Has anyone ever approached Bethlehem to ask if this pink, so to speak, could go through Embarrass to Mill?
No.
We haven't asked?
We haven't asked. My guess would be the answer would be no. They closed those
That's
gates.
for school, during
during
school, that's their
school.
playground.
That's their playground, okay.
Yep.
I was gonna say, because otherwise,
The alley, the parking is technically our parking, but yeah, I mean,
they're gonna lose all that parking.
yes. There's some, if you wanted to help with parking, you could open up parking on Pine Street further down, where the bus comes currently to pick up some students for the school, and see if we can move that school bus parking down, and then by the, right hand, like across from the post office, you could open up some parking there. It's probably not gonna grab all of the parking there. There's also that lot next door that's empty.
And going, and I'm, again, pipe dream here, so if pink's the cheaper route, temporary, potential temporary, could it go all the way to Cedar to Mill? And it's a ways out of the downtown.
I think that's the issue, then you're pushing it
Then you're
out of
pushing
downtown
people out of the,
instead of
that's
in
the problem.
downtown.
I look at that and I just see all kinds of safety things that make me,
Yeah, I think there's safety on the other side too. I think that entryway into the alley
Yeah.
too, which is already horrible going around by the old fire station there with
Mhm.
people coming in and out with a blind spot, that now you're gonna be funneling
yeah.
bikes down there too technically. I guess, unfortunately, I don't think there's the best route as of right now. The only reason I think alley one might be is it's potentially cheaper, there's more space to work with. Yes, you have Pine Street going through the center of it, but realistically, outside of Hortonville lanes, you don't have that many bars there anymore, where you used to have a lot more of the bars behind. You used to have Stroh's back there and a lot more traffic. I think some of that traffic has been brought down a little bit in comparison, but that was kind of my only thought. It's a lot.
Well, isn't Bethlehem's goal to
To
build,
leave.
I know it's not anytime soon, but isn't it their goal to build a school out by the church now?
Yeah, but that's like 3, 5+ years.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got a lot, by that time, we would be
Yeah.
getting funding for one of the other options. The downtown will be happening before that school will get built.
Right.
Right. And that's happening in stages as well. It's not even, it's like the early childhood will get first and this and that. So
It was 5 years ago for 5 years in the future. I mean, it's been planning, it just keeps getting
funding.
It's, yeah, it's expensive one.
So, our goal tonight is to do what?
Ideally would be to kind of have an idea of where we want to go. So financially, for the kids funding, we have about 800,000 for the downtown section. That's outside of the CIP. But if you do a good amount of these other areas, I think you're gonna be hitting into that number, if you do the blue or the green route. I think realistically, if it came down to it and we were trying to basically make it work for now with the county to have it actually go through some way, I think the easiest, cheaper route would be the pink route. It's kind of hard to make decisions on finances when we don't have the biggest financial impactor to us, which is gonna be the Main Street reconstruction. So that's kind of why I'm very hesitant to say that any of these other routes are even an option, because realistically, when Main Street estimates come in, we might not have enough to do even the parking lot. I don't know where those numbers are gonna be in. When we got our estimates originally, it was in 2021. Those prices have definitely gone up since then.
Yeah.
So,
So because this connects the trails and that extension beyond or out on 15, so like grants and things, before we make any kind of decision, can we look into what might potentially, I mean, I get it, a grant is a grant, you apply for it, there's no guarantees, but I just feel like with the creek, there's grants out there that,
my thought with the pink is not necessarily we're done then. It would be, if you went that pink route, you could still look at applying for grants along the river. I guess the issue I think we're gonna run into is timeline. Because as soon as 2026 happens and they're bringing stuff through, we're gonna have probably a year to get our part in. I don't know if the county is gonna allow us to sit there and continually apply until we get the grant.
So, my thinking is that I'm with you. I think ideally, the green route is the absolute best that we could. And I think if we, as a group, believe that that's actually going to happen at some point, then I think that pushes us to utilizing the pink route as the route for the time being until you can come up with the funds to do that bridge and to get back in there. But if we don't think that that's ever going to happen, or that is, decades away, then I would say the blue route is probably the way to go. That's my thinking. Is that, but I like the green, but it's just too much money.
it is.
And I like Nathan's suggestion that, we could lay down as the pink route and then potentially go searching for funding to do the green, and then just end you could leave the pink's gonna be there, but, it could be just a split, and you can go from wherever.
The parking in the alley would pretty much have to go.
And one next to
Yeah, but,
Next to the school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's no, to me that's probably the biggest, it also gives us the easiest option from transition to go into the funky. If we yank that out and really define, here's a true path area.
That parking is full
Every
weekend, and
It's
even
full
during the day.
school year, it's
Fall in the morning.
Teachers.
yeah, it's all the
and
teachers.
stuff. Where are
And to
they
go to
going?
the grant side, what I'll say is, if we could buy a year there's still no guarantees. There's no question we could apply for, now we have to get clarity on, can we use the village's match of redoing Main Street as one of the matches? The county has to be somewhat flexible on some of this, but if we can maneuver some of that, and they can slow up the timeline, maybe we can make it all, one of the other ones work. We're gonna apply for the grants either way, and think just long-term, how do you make it happen? Because a lot of those give you a 2 or 3 year window. The hard part just becomes, maybe I can say this because I'm the independent third party. The county's kind of funny because they're the ones pushing to say, tell us which trail you're gonna use so we can finish our design. But it's like, well, finish your design so we know how much money we have. And,
Yeah.
if I'm being honest, right? And so it's like, well, it makes it a little bit easier for us to think about long-term,
I just worry about that parking.
I also worry about spending $200-some thousand on a temporary fix when you could spend another $150 and have a more permanent solution, potentially permanent with the light blue. You know what I mean? If we're gonna spend half of what
170 and 250,
it's
260.
214 and 343, so it's $100,000, a little over $100,000 to get the light blue solution, or 316. My apologies, 316. So it's $100,000 difference. If we're spending the majority of the cost anyway with a temporary solution,
We're paying for it
why
twice.
we're paying for it twice?
Right.
Why wouldn't we at least do the blue, which is, which I'm still not with you. I like the green one, obviously, with its
Yeah.
ridiculous price, but it's a more
You have less concerns about the creek than I do, obviously.
whatever.
'Cause
I'm colorblind,
I
so
have
it doesn't matter.
I have
gonna say-
concerns about the cost when you start, I couldn't
I just
imagine
struggle to
putting heavy
spend
equipment
hundreds of
on that.
thousands of dollars on temporary
Yeah.
This- okay.
Well,
Yeah,
this is-
stuff.
this
It
is-
just really hurts my heart to do
I
that.
piss off how
Yeah.
many people in the process doing it.
I hate spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a temporary, even if our future goal is green someday,
Yeah.
or yellow, whatever color it is.
The one thing I would add on the blue is if we knew we were gonna do the parking lot, there's probably a cost savings in there, cause we were gonna yank some, I mean, we're gonna redo some of that design anyway. So if we knew we were gonna do the parking lot and or the creek,
But that's another problem, right? You don't know
I
how much
know.
the creek repair is gonna be
the creek,
because,
I can tell you would be about $250,000 to $400,000, depending on how far we get permission to go, how far we need to go. The parking lot is probably 200,000, so if you threw in the parking lot, we went 3, 4, we're at about somewhere between $1 million and 1.3 would be my guess, to do the parking lot, the full creek restoration, and the blue.
which we have to do the parking lot and the creek restoration either way, right?
At
But-
some point, I mean, your
Creek
timing,
restoration is, Aaron's confident he could probably get a grant to help with that.
yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, either way, but
Right.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I mean, those are, they're factored, but they're gonna have to happen either way. But they would probably be pushed up in urgency if we're choosing the light gray too, right?
Right.
So
And
it's
then
like,
there'd be cost savings.
what do you do?
If I can chime in for a moment, this has been an awesome discussion. I really like the green quite a bit. You know, once the village's wallet is open at $300,000, I really think we should pick something that's just going to be like an awesome asset and appeal to cyclists, because this is a bike trail. And it would be memorable. I know that it's got the highest cost. I like the light blue as well, but the green one does feel safe, and I did love all of the points that Julie made. The village's land being right there looks great. It would be just allow us to develop that in the next 10 or 20 years as well. I think it's on a longer 10, 20-year scope, it would feel like a great investment, and I'm aware that it costs what it costs, but it could be a smart investment, and folks would remember it, and you're part of a much bigger picture of what's going to be a brand new multi-municipality trail. So I don't want to see it end at the pink. I think that's a nice maybe temporary option, but it doesn't look like a bike trail to me. And that's all I got. Thank you.
So I think of is it the Friendship Trail, where like you're on like, or you can be in the wheel wash, then you can go on the Friendship Trail, and then all of a sudden you go over that, what is it, the trestle? I don't even
Trestle
know.
bridge, yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're in like an urban area, and it's kind of confusing. Like, where am I going? Now I've got traffic, but I'm on a sidewalk, but I'm not. It's kind of weird. It is a weird transition.
I mean, I will tell you, just to go back to the whole, I would just go from the yellow to ride through the street. I mean, we've talked about this a lot. You know, what are you gonna do? And unless it's a very clear, I mean, we will have to be very clever about signage. We will have to be very clear about, you know, talking to the county to say, can we paint a certain portion of it so the colors all continue to match up in an area so it looks trail-like? You know, clearly that's a lot easier on the green and the blue than it is on the pink, but yeah, I mean, no matter what we do, it's going to have to be very creative, and I 100% agree with you. We will. I mean, we do this often, so it's not, you know, it's not impossible. It's just the biggest piece I would probably add to you today to just making a decision is it gives us a lot more time than we know we need to tell the county which route we're going to go, but then it gives us a lot more to start the planning and design to say, what can we get true estimates and bids from the engineers and for the creek, which our team can put up pretty quick so we can start hitting up all those folks for the grants. But yes, I mean, there's no question, no matter what we do, we're gonna have to work in some very creative ensuring in, you know, the simplest way, like for example, is painting and other stuff like that. So if there's a continuation, we're putting some designs or paintings in there to show where the trail park goes.
So long term, if I'm getting, and speak up if I'm way off base here, but long term, we'd love to do the green. And if we did short-term, I shouldn't even say short-term, but if we ever did the light blue, we could still do the green. And then half
That's what I
of,
was just thinking.
you know what I mean, half of that's already complete, like, I don't know, I mean,
I mean, it's nice because then you do at least have a cutback on the trail to go to the other businesses too,
Yeah.
if you
yeah.
wanted to.
Like if you wanted to avoid that alley, you wanted to avoid that, you could. Or, hey, you know what, I want to grab a bite to eat, this is where I want to pull in. I'm very hesitant to spend all that money on pink and then spend money again on blue later on and potentially spend it again on green.
And at least the blue, half of the blue is part of the green. I mean, it connects up to the blue, so you're not wasting, some of the stuff you've already done is already there. I mean, I think green is our end goal, what we want, but I think anything we do on the blue is only helping, setting us up for the green, right?
I mean, in the blue, like I said, I think if we package it, depending on how we time it, we can get some cost savings in there because we're gonna have to redo the parking lot in the creek anyway. So, there is potentially some cost savings in packaging it all together with the blue, so if that helps. And the other thing I will tell you is the green and the blue will be in the 40-year plan. There's also some cool connectivities, very long-term, to think about easements to get, you know, how do we walk from the blue up to Main Street and a handful of other things. So we've had a ton of discussions. And we'll have some pretty cool designs and, you know, images and renderings for you to see when the plan is done, but that's a longer process and we want to ensure we're engaging all community partners and business owners and property owners in that, but it was definitely an uncomfortable spot to come and say, we're giving you all these guesses and we don't know a handful on all of it, and Nathan and I went around, so do we do the full, show all the creek numbers and all the parking lot numbers when we still don't have a good parking lot design? Because the parking lot design will definitely change if you go blue, because we'll want to ensure safety, in which case you may lose 1 or 2 stalls, but.
If I had to vote, I'd vote
Does
blue.
this green option include the cost of the bridge? Like, it includes everything?
Yeah, the bridge estimate that we got, is about 300,000 now. There's 3 or 4 different routes you can go for how you build those bridges, but yes, that does include the bridge being built. What's not in there is if FEMA could charge that 30.
Hello?
Can you hear us, Grace?
We can hear you. Hello?
Do I need to get closer?
No, I think the internet just fluctuated, that's why I got kicked off.
Oh,
Gracie, you still
Cannot
there?
repeat, so.
You may need to call her back.
You can just hang up and call her back if you're done.
I feel like the pink impacts school, potential business parking, safety. The blue impacts some of the business owners, but
Hey, Grace.
not nearly as many
Hey, I'm back, thanks.
inconvenienced.
I don't know where you lost this, if you want me to kind of start over, but,
I lost you at the bridge estimate.
okay, yeah, so the bridge estimate that's in there is the 300,000 is for that stretch of the bridge. The one piece that is missing, because we don't know if we're doing it along with the creek restoration or not, is will there be a FEMA or DNR requirement for permitting? That piece is not in there, because it'll all depend. If we do the creek at the same time and the bridge at the same time, then there's a cost savings, and then we would have to do full permitting for both. There's also where they will let us build within the floodplain. So there's the creek actual bed and body, and then the floodplain that differ. And it's really hard right now until we can lock in when the creek stabilization and restoration is going to be done for us to define the creek bed. So the standards are about 1 inch. We have about 0.8 inches here that we can make modifications and move without having to do the permitting through FEMA and DNR. We can probably do that with blue and with doing the creek stabilization. With green, it's really hard to tell because you have to pick those dates and our times, and then we base the water, and we have to do everything outside of when the fish are moving, and so it's very specific about picking that time frame to say when can we do it and make it happen, and then where are we actually locking in the points of the bridge and how we can do grading. So I know that's not very helpful, but that's kind of one of the things where I said, we're definitely gonna put the green in the 40-year plan. It's obviously a lot bigger chunk to take on now, and there's, again, that additional cost savings on the stream side. If we do the green and the stream at the same side, there's the cost savings if we do the parking lot and the blue at the same time. When we package it all together, it really can range from that, you know, I'd say on the very optimistic side to do all the blue and get it done, and the parking lot in the stream, you're probably looking at $1 million. You know, you're looking at 1.6 to 2 million if we do the green and the parking lot and the creek.
Has that property owner, to the west of the village lot, have they been contacted?
Yeah, multiple times.
Oh, they're not into it?
No, and I offered a large amount and they still weren't interested. I think if you do the blue route and at some point that house comes for sale in the future, the board at that time could make a decision if they wanted to potentially purchase and then put it in easement and then sell. But
You're talking about the house right by the creek that just built the garage on Mill Street?
yeah,
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, they just, I don't think they're gonna sell it.
no.
Okay,
they're
so
not gonna
question
sell.
though, this is total devil's advocate, and I'm
No.
gonna be guilty of it.
Yeah.
Are
If it's
you
green-
looking for a motion tonight on which one?
We have to tell the county by August 1st.
yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be, I think it's only discussion, but I think I need to have a, oh no.
So it's
Yeah,
an action.
I'd
Possible
prefer,
action.
yeah, I'd rather have a definition of where we're going so I can tell the county for engineering purposes, because otherwise the engineering firm can sit there and,
Yeah, so it gets more of just a question, just because we were just talking about this property there. If that green went through without a bridge, straight through, and we were either to acquire, there's no, it would have to be done, there's no eminent domain, is what I'm trying to say.
Which property or which part are you talking about?
To the west, and I'm not suggesting that, but what I'm saying is, would the cost just
you
go?
can't eminent domain.
You can't eminent domain a trail,
And
right?
even if you could, that would take us 4 years. I would bet I'd ask leading to the attorney, but I would bet you the whole process to get that done, we'd have to get appraisals, we'd have to argue why.
Yeah,
There's
and
no
I'm
way
not
we'd get it done in
suggesting it,
time.
I wanna be clear
Yeah,
on
no,
that.
no.
But
I
just
mean,
looking at the cost, I'm like, oh, look at that, it would just,
do you care if I share all the discussions we've had real quickly and point at the map? I know it's gonna take an extra second, but, so we have like thought about, just quickly, all the other options from here over. We have also thought about a ton of options from here to here. And so I will tell you, we talked about bringing it through and how we could do and any of the things over here. And a few weeks ago, we kind of went to, we know the county will pay to here. We have to creatively think about this space here. We've kind of explored all the different possibilities and options. Just so you know, this is like your best cost, best out 3 options, because we're on such a short timeline. So, sorry if it helps. And this is what we keep referring to as the green for anyone who is color deficient. I know it's yellow and yellow, or yellow and this is green. But so the county will stop here. We have to figure out this portion to get to here.
I like
And-
the light blue.
I say blue. I say blue.
We may lose our time on the green anyway,
just, get me, that was the question, just, yeah.
on the other side though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, for future state, maybe.
So I would need a motion
Let's say it's
Is it green or blue?
if there are no more questions.
Call it green or blue? Green? This one right there.
That's blue.
It's
Light
blue.
blue.
That's the light, that's the
Yeah.
blue over there.
Light blue.
Yeah.
dark blue, it's defined as light blue, dark blue, I think,
Okay.
in your,
Yeah.
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 So what do we just want a motion of which one?
We need a motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion to, to follow the light blue path, as displayed on the map, for the proposed, multimodal trail.
It would be option 2.
Option 2.
I will second that.
Roll call. Jim?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Grace?
I,
Okay, motion carried. N, discussion and possible action on recording of meetings policy.
This was asked to be on the agenda by board members.
Here's me. So when we were recording meetings initially, we used to record committee and board meetings. And somewhere along the line, a decision was made by the board that we would only do board meetings and not committee meetings. And the majority of the calls that I get are calls specific to like a real, a topic that might be more discussed at committee level and then brought to board. So there's a lot of discussion we're missing out in those videos. I would just like to go back to just recording all committee meetings and board meetings.
So,
Would that include planning and zoning getting recorded?
I would think so. I mean, there's a lot of discussion.
It's the same thing of just wondering what the discussions are.
I would say if we record anything, we would record the village board and the planning and zoning. Everything on the committee meetings comes to the board anyway, and there's usually full discussion. The only one there wouldn't be is planning and zoning because there's only Julie and I on planning and zoning, where on the committee meetings, we have 5 of the board members. So we would be refreshing 2 of the people. And we've asked a lot of the public to attend those committee meetings, so that we'd have to go back to them being out in the audience and just us up at the board tables. So it would be, otherwise it's a little confusing. Who's a board member, who's a citizen?
I think with the transparency concern being so forefront, as far as community members have shared they want to see transparency, and as a board member, transparency is great. I think having like the public safety meetings or the committee meetings be recorded would be great, because there's dialogue that I would like to reference or be able to go back on, and where I'm wondering what you said and what others have said, because the details matter for some of these issues, and I just want it to be crystal clear what each board member and community member is saying about topics.
so I have two reasons. I don't agree with recording all of the committee meetings. One is that the committee meetings, we don't actually enact anything, because we don't, everything, all we do is we just it's just an open discussion. So if you're gonna record the meetings, they're going to be more like the board meetings now, where everything is very formal. It's no, let's throw some ideas against the wall, even if they're bad ideas, and let's hash them out. So, I mean, for that reason, I don't think that it's a really good idea to go through and record them, because you're going to disincentivize the ability to just throw stuff out there. Second reason is, I agree with Jeannie that if we had a really well thought out discussion about including community members in the committee meetings. And we have switched the format over to a nice round table. People sit wherever they want to sit. It is basically an open dialogue. We're allowed, the residents that show up can just talk, which is exactly what we were trying to get to. And I think, let me finish please, Grace. I think if we go to recorded meetings, then when somebody speaks, they're going to have to stand up, identify themselves. They're going to have to say who they are, where they live. So I think if we do recorded committee meetings, they're going to have to be like the board meetings, where we say, this is your 5 minutes. If you have a comment or a suggestion, you can get up and talk. Other than that, you can't have a round table. You can't see who's talking. You can't just have random people out there.
It doesn't matter.
I'm so happy you brought that up, because that is a meeting that I was concerned about. Because at the beginning of that meeting, Kat and I both asked about the format of the meeting.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I would like to finish. Pat and I each asked about the format of the meeting because it was actually you who put into the agenda, if you will, that there was a 5-minute opening for citizens to give their concerns, and you did kind of run it. You did run it like a regular board meeting, and it was not like how you are describing a round table.
I did not run that
And,
meeting like
For
that.
example, if
I
that
did.
meeting would be recorded,
Yeah,
then
Grace,
we
I
could all
didn't do
sit
that,
right
Grace.
now and get the facts on that meeting.
Grace, I added that so that in that particular meeting, the disagreement that occurred when I added that, and the reason that I added that was that if somebody had something that they wanted to discuss that wasn't on the agenda, they could stand up and discuss that in that 5-minute time period, which is exactly the same way we do with the board. We still had a round table, we still had open input, but we still could not allow input on stuff outside of that 5 minutes that was not on the agenda. And the problem and the things you're referring to were you and Pat wanted to discuss something that was not on the agenda, and it was not in that 5 minutes, and I kept cutting everybody off because I was supposed to be running the meeting saying, this is not on the agenda, we can't be talking about this. So that has nothing, that didn't change the structure of the meeting. I added that because if I remember correctly, I think Jack
I have a
was
recording
there.
of that meeting.
What's that?
I recorded
Yeah,
that meeting.
I think Jack was there.
So I'm confused of what was being discussed that wasn't on the agenda. That I'm a little confused on.
Okay,
So I have
so
nothing to
if
hide here.
if here's a good example, right? So our agenda, if I decide that I want to talk about the way the agenda is structured, now our board meeting has are there any changes to the agenda where we can talk about that? That meeting didn't have, are there any changes or any comments or anything about the agenda? So that wasn't a discussion how the agenda that we were going to have for the meeting wasn't up for a debate and it wasn't up for discussion. But Pat and
They asked a
Grace wanted to
question.
discuss it.
They
No,
asked
no.
a question about the 5 minutes because that was the first time that was
Then I
implemented
answered the
on
question, and
the
then
meeting.
Pat started it as a discussion, and I started to stop it. That's exactly what happened. It was not the discussion of the agenda, how the agenda was made,
I'll
the
go back
discussion,
to my
it was not
recording.
on the agenda to talk about.
Yeah, I'll go back to my recording.
You can go back to it, that's fine.
But I remember
I say,
being there, and it was very uncomfortable.
yeah,
So, but this, which is ironic that we're talking about that, what's on the agenda is to talk about whether or not we're recording these. Committee meetings, I agree, we went to this roundtable discussion, and maybe we need to modify that in some way. But there's so much content that happens at a committee meeting. I myself haven't been able to attend a committee meeting, but then I'm a board member that needs to make a decision on that. And I was one of the 2 that wasn't on that committee. Now I need to help make a decision on that. Well, the decision is a foregone conclusion, right? Because the 5 people have really essentially already decided. The 2 people who couldn't maybe attend or weren't part of the committee, if I couldn't attend that meeting, I have no way of learning the content of that meeting except for a summary that's handed to me. Being part of those ideas thrown against the wall, we've just finished a discussion right now with these trails where we were throwing things against the wall at I thought that was great. I thought that was great collaborative discussion. There's a lot of really good collaborative discussion that happens at the committee level. Throwing ideas against the wall is exactly what our constituents are looking for. We don't want to think of that box theory. We want to be part of let's think outside the box. Let's throw some ideas out there. Some things are going to stick, some things aren't. I have absolutely nothing to hide in a committee meeting.
I'm not saying I have anything to hide in a committee meeting. Please don't even apply that. Don't even insinuate that.
Why would you want to record it? We sat at,
I
Sean
just
and I
gave you the
both
reasons
sat
why I
in a
don't
panel
want to record it.
discussion. The
We
press
don't-
star had, and one of the questions was something about transparency, and every single person on that panel talked about the recording of meetings being such an asset, that it encourages people to step up and look for positions on a board. It's not so, they can look at the meetings on their own time, they can understand the content, or at least how we do the meetings. Every one of us said the same thing, transparency. We had, where we were recording these meetings, there wasn't a problem with it, and then we stopped doing it.
As long as I've been here, we haven't recorded them.
But we work. Go
I
back-
think,
I have- I
I
have
think we
seen
said
it.
it
I've
was
been
a
here for 5
problem
years.
because it made more work for our office, which Nathan's already said is overworked. And so we said, let's just do the village board meetings because everything still gets brought back, any committee meeting still gets brought back to the board for full discussion.
But the meat and potatoes of the conversation is sometimes really important for those maybe 2 board members that weren't here. And there's been times I've been on vacation and asked for a recording. I went and asked for the recording, went actually into the office to view it because it was corrupt, went to go watch it, couldn't watch it. So that entire public safety meeting was moot. I couldn't watch it. So there's a lot of questions that get asked. So essentially, you have a committee of 5 board members that are coming out of that committee meeting with a recommendation, but wouldn't we want the other 2 people to be, at least have access to that conversation if they can't attend a committee meeting?
And that's why I always say, are there more questions? So
We
if
just
you
the
have
same.
questions or concerns, when it comes to full board, then you ask them.
But if you didn't hear the content of you didn't hear those
Otherwise,
ideas
we would
thrown
just
out on
have
the
7
wall.
people on the committee.
I'm just gonna go back to, I have no problem, absolutely no problem recording all the meetings. No problem at all. I don't think there's anything that
You know,
that speaks to our, the public about transparency. We need to show them that we're leaders, that we can collaborate and we can come up with ideas, and sometimes that is throwing ideas against the wall and trying to come up with the best solution out there.
you know, at one point I asked the library board when I attended a meeting, do you want your meetings taped?
That's
You
a
know what
different
the
board.
consensus was?
They didn't want it.
No,
They didn't want it, and that's a completely different board.
yeah.
I'm talking this
So
board.
where's
needs
the
to do meetings.
transparency there?
I don't
You,
even-
you see what I'm saying? I talked
don't
to
see what-
Todd,
I don't
I
see
talked
what
to
you're
Todd Tim this week.
I do not see what you're saying.
And I
You're trying
said to
draw
him-
A parallel to the library board. This is the village board, the library is its own entity.
I talked to Todd Tim this week, and I said, do you tape the school board meetings? He said, no. I said, do you video them? No. I said, okay, it's coming up for discussion. He said, why? He said, we have 9 committees. We have our school board meetings. He said, we tape nothing. He said, what we want to do is have people, if they have concerns, come into the meetings, talk to us face to face.
Have you been to a school board meeting? Like,
Yes, I have.
so when you go to the school board meetings, the staff, I think of Todd, and I think of a high amount of respect for this man. But he comes through with a recommendation, and 99% of the time, the board approves the recommendation. There's not a ton of discussion at the school board meetings. It's the agenda, they go through the agenda, there's the recommendation, there's the approval. It's very,
But I'm
very
still
black and white.
saying, he said, like he said, I don't see why you would do this. He said, invite your public to your meetings, and I said, we have. He said, you post them the way you're supposed to legally? I said, yes, we do. I said, very few people attend our meetings, very few.
Yeah, and I can call
And I
Todd
said-
to get his opinion.
and
I
then-
don't need you to secondhand it, Jeannie. All I'm saying is, clearly, there's people who are very opposed to it in here, and I have nothing to hide. I don't care. I hate watching
We're
the
not
YouTube
hiding
videos.
anything.
I absolutely hate watching the YouTube videos, but they're so important to the public, and they're so important for transparency. So if you don't want it recorded, I think we pull it to a vote and we decide, and I don't know what to say. I know that personally I've been affected by not being able to attend a committee meeting and then being thrown into a board meeting and not having 100% of that discussion available to me. And then this is what we're recommending. Well, but hang on, did we consider these things? And I don't even remember what it was. Was it the recording equipment? It was something that we made a big decision. We made a financial decision, but I couldn't watch that meeting and I couldn't attend it.
And that's where he said, then you get a hold of the administrator or one of the other board members, and you say what went on at the meeting. That's what he said, that's how they handled their meetings.
We just did the Nye Street speed limits. We did that in public safety. Public safety came back with a recommendation, and then it came to the board, and we hashed out every possible option. And there wasn't a consensus of 5 board members that came up with that.
But the
And
way
we
our
just
committees
went through the
are-
whole thing.
The way our committees are, the way they're designed, is that there are generally 4 or 5 board members at that committee meeting. And that collaboration, that is so valuable to watch and to be part of, or at least be able to attend that meeting. Myself being on a board, if I'm not part of that committee and I couldn't attend that meeting, I sure would have loved to have seen the meat and potatoes of that discussion, so that I can make that decision adequately. All I'm asking for is transparency, including to board members. For me to go to a board member or another board member, now I've got a walking quorum. So I'm not gonna go do
Then you call
that.
your administrator.
But getting it from one person, well, then the second person, if you ask them, now I'm a walking quorum, I'm breaking the law.
And we have all the minutes. Jane puts everything in the minutes. So, I mean, there's transparency all over the place.
That's not true. If some of us are saying we're not experiencing transparency, that is also a truth. I would not agree that transparency is everywhere. For example, tonight I think that you just shared that you reached out to Todd Timms to ask him about this topic if his school boards if his school board meetings are recorded. In a similar scenario, I recall that in a public safety meeting that you reached out to to a local business owner to say, hey, parking's getting discussed, and get their feedback on it. So the pattern of you can reach out to people to let them know a topic is on the agenda. I think we all want that similar, like, we're being valued and it's transparent. It's especially transparent when, the president is giving them a call.
Once again, I will tell you, you are incorrect, and if you call Jerry Guyette, she will tell you that she called me. I did not call her.
I mean, I will have to go to a recording. This is the perfect reason of why meetings.
So it's to scrutinize something I've said? Is that why you want to record these meetings? To come back and say, Jeannie, you said this, Jim, you said that, Julie, you said this. Oh my goodness. So is that what we're doing here? Are we
No.
scrutinizing each other on this board?
No. In my opinion, the video, it is there for information for the public, especially if they can't make it to a meeting. Fellow board members, if they're not able to attend a meeting, and it's there as a record. So and there's been times I've had to go back and look, like I knew we had a discussion on something over a year ago. I went back to that meeting and re-listened to the meeting so I understood what we discussed. So I knew what I said, what other people said, so that that was part of the research for what we did. I hate watching these meetings. It's not for going back and listening to he said, she said, anything. This is me. Grace speaks for herself. I don't go back to do these. I just feel that the public needs this for transparency. We also have staff that watch these meetings that can't make it. Or sitting in this crowd sometimes is really intimidating, because then everyone's looking at, well, why is that person here tonight? And not that is truly what we're doing, but sometimes that's assumed. What is that person? So if somebody came, or they're interested in how a topic went down, but they don't want to come sit here, we should give them that opportunity to watch that meeting afterwards. What's the difference? It's a public meeting. It's an open public meeting. There's no reason, in my opinion, that we would have to pick and choose which ones we record. So,
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that I want access to the meetings. It's not.
You have access to every
he
meeting,
said,
Grace.
He said, she said. It's because the access is wonderful to get the whole context of the discussion. I want to be part of it, or at least be an observer of planning and zoning. What did they talk about? What was exchanged? Then I can make a more informed decision and ask better questions when the agenda items come up that came from different committees. Thank you.
so I haven't heard from Bob or Jane. I don't know if you guys have an opinion, or even Shauna, if you guys have an opinion on this. Otherwise, I'm just gonna make a motion and let it go to a vote.
Any other questions?
Do you know, the only question I have is, we've recently added, because we didn't previously have this, where we did the minutes necessarily for the committee meetings, at least I've never seen them. So now we've added something on here for the committee minutes where, you know, like the public safety meeting or public facilities or whatever has to give a report put in, it gets part of the packet and we go through it, right? I know that because I've had to do it for a couple of the meetings. Do you not feel that those suffice? And I guess I don't really care either, but you don't feel like those suffice at all?
No. Because I know if a meeting is over an hour or an hour and a half long, and the meeting minutes are one page, that's a lot of content there. How do I make a decision on the cameras we're gonna be putting up in the admin here? How do I help make that decision when I couldn't be part of the discussion, I was out of town, and now I can't, I have no way to know what that discussion was. And I know the meeting, because you can look at the time it was started and the time it was adjourned. A lot of nuts and bolts happened in that
No,
meeting.
and I understand that. I'm just really out of curiosity. Do you not feel that those, because maybe the reporting needs to be better and less, not Jane, but like I'm taking the notes for my own meeting, right? So maybe they're lacking in the level of detail that you need.
I
or
think
maybe
historically, the committee minutes, if it's not Jane or Lauren, or I think just human nature, we're lacking in that. I don't think we have all those ideas thrown out. You know what I mean? You know, to Jim's point, we do throw out ideas, and sometimes I think that should be part of the record.
So then my next question is to Nathan is, I think I recall when we first discussed all this was partly because of time and effort it takes to edit, do all the stuff that we need to do. Is that going to be a problem? Is it going to be?
It's gonna add more time. It's not,
How often do we have committee meetings?
Well, I mean,
It
I'm
would
talking
be
like planning,
good.
zoning, if we're adding all of those groups, how many meetings do we have that we're?
Generally, normally, you get one plan and zoning a month, 2 village board. Plan and zoning is usually at tops an hour. A lot of the time is processing time.
That's what I'm saying,
Which
so-
has been cut down a lot because of the
New system.
new computers we have. We got a higher capability for her to process videos, but
I guess I just wanna ask, because if it's
I don't wanna
put a
make-
strain, I don't wanna put a strain on anybody either.
it would take probably an extra 20 minutes when you have one of those meetings.
So we're talking 3 for sure meetings a month, maybe 1 committee meeting a month, sometimes 2, depending on what we got going on.
Yeah,
So
I
now
think-
we're talking
I
4.
think on average, I would say, without any knowledge, it'd be about 6 a year. Well, depending on, for each of them, I guess. Some are less than others. Like,
Yeah.
obviously, the facilities is very limited. Public safety, I think, met 4 times this year so far. In the past, they haven't a lot, but we're trying to use the committee meetings more. Public Works, obviously, we're trying to get them to do it more often, but probably 6 to 8 a year, I would say, of each of them.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I don't wanna put another burden on staff who've got a lot going on, and I do think that we're gonna have more of those meetings with all the things that are coming up. We're gonna have more of these committee type meetings if we're really truly, as you said, trying to push more of it to committee.
So processing time, when you're saying, so somebody starts a process, it's not that they're sitting there for that process, it's that the process is happening.
No, I
behind the
mean,
scenes.
realistically, like for the village board meetings, they probably are gonna take the longest, cause most of the time it's downloading the videos. Once you have the videos downloaded off of the server, into the software, then it takes a few minutes to kind of clip each end to start and end,
Mhm.
and then basically you
Cause it's
just,
multiple little videos, right?
yeah.
You have to clip together.
You just kind of grab the whole file and
Push it
import,
through,
and it
yeah.
just sits in the background.
They snip off
They
the front
snip
and
them,
back,
yeah.
is what they do, yeah.
So it takes a little bit of time and might slow down the computer from time to time, but I don't know. It's not as bad as it used to be when when we only had 8 RAM, and very basic computer in that position, where we paid for a higher end computer to process the videos in the first place, so.
And initially, I was recording all of them, attending the meetings and uploading them. And then I handed everything YouTube-wise off to the village, changed login credentials, the whole works. But initially, if you look at those videos, you can tell the difference between when I was recording. So initially, I was doing this.
Yeah, I just wanted to know,
Yeah.
I think for me, an obvious thing is if it's gonna burden, I don't wanna burden either, like that's
not
not
gonna
what we're
hinder
I think you're just taking away the open discussion. I mean, the other thing is that now you've got residents coming in. And so, say you keep it as an open format, right? Now you got the residents, and now if you're gonna have an open discussion with the resident, and that's gonna get posted, and they say something that, they didn't mean to say, or comes across the wrong way, now we're posting videos of them too. And we're inviting them in to have this off-the-cuff, open, whatever hits you, you respond to somebody says something. I don't think that we can maintain the same structure, and we argued and argued to get this, to
So
get this
maybe
open.
we'll
I don't think
modify
we can,
that.
I don't think we can maintain it.
Even the seating, it's still a round table, but as far as a resident goes, we wouldn't just secretly video them and upload it. We would look at them and say, disclosure, these are recorded, these are
Yeah,
put
I
on the
understand.
village site.
Well, I don't think you can do round table either, because the camera's over here. So I think you're done with the round table.
No.
You're back to this. To get all the board members who are speaking on
When I
camera.
come in for these
'Cause
meetings,
if I get my back to it,
everything's over
then-
here.
It's right here. Yeah, if I have I usually sit facing this wall. My back's to the cameras. You can't have a round table. You could maybe have it if you put all the board members this way and all the relevant people, employees, and then put the citizens on the other side, and then have them identify themselves. But you're still, no, it can't stay the way that it is. Just the camera angle has to change. You have to go to this type of a format. And we argued to get that open discussion where you think it's difficult to stand up, in a board meeting where you're not even on camera, where these people are standing there and get up and talk? How about doing it while you're gonna be on camera and posted online? I don't see that making it any more open to the public. I think that makes it even more restrictive.
I don't feel it makes it restrictive. I think folks attending these meetings know that they're public meetings.
Everywhere you
It's not a
go.
it's not a restricted meeting.
We'll agree to disagree on that.
I don't think it's restricting the meeting. I think folks are coming in because there's agenda items that pertain to them, and they would appreciate it being recorded in some of these scenarios.
I just think it brings transparency. And I did say, maybe we need to modify that round table. Maybe it's not necessarily round table, maybe it's a little different, but still allow people to have open dialogue. It's to prevent people from having to wait their 5 minutes at the beginning of the meeting and then not be able to discuss anything later. It's inviting people to discuss during that discussion at that committee level. And I don't think simply having that round table eliminates the need for transparency.
In my opinion, it does.
Okay, I would like to make a motion, unless anyone has any other comments. I didn't hear from Bob or Jane, and it's perfectly fine if neither of you have comments. I just don't want to cut you off. I would like to make a motion to record all village board, committee, and I guess, I don't even know the right word for this, because I want to include public, or planning and zoning,
committees and commissions?
committees and commission meetings, not including library board, that is a different board. That was my motion.
Is there a second?
I second motion.
Jim?
Opposed.
Opposed.
Opposed?
Opposed?
I don't care.
Aye.
Motion denied.
Grace?
Grace.
Grace didn't get a vote.
Aye.
Okay, so we have 3 ayes, 4 nays. Motion denied. O, discussion on allowing murals in the village.
So I had calls from 2 different business owners in the downtown who are kind of concerned about the murals, on some of the murals that would potentially go up in the downtown and surrounding. So I looked into potential ordinances. There's really not, we can regulate the size and that's about it. We can't regulate the content. So whether it's a professionally done mural, it's someone's hand drawing on a wall, there's really no standards we could put on murals. So the question is whether or not we want to continue to allow them. I mean, we would have to probably create an ordinance to allow them, because technically, re-looking through our ordinance, murals would be kind of considered a sign, so we would have to probably allow them, which,
Doesn't our downtown ordinance for the signs, I remember putting size restrictions
yes.
on there. So a full mural on the side of a building right now would be out of that compliance for a sign, right?
Correct, in the downtown. The size, I think, I can look it up, but yeah, I don't really have a good memory of if it was 15% of the space or if it was a certain square footage. But
I just remember when we did the downtown zoning, we can't determine the content on a sign, but we can determine the size and the type, like and even like material, which way it faces, whether it's perpendicular or parallel to the building, or and I think with all the work we're doing downtown, I think we need to have something that defines something size-wise for a mural, because I think there's a huge benefit to having murals anywhere in the village if it's appropriate, not cemetery, that kind of thing. But I just think that even some guidelines that maybe so everyone's on the same page.
like what kind of guidelines? Because realistically,
Does New London have something?
there's places that have things, like I really liked Baraboo's, and that's what I was initially gonna present.
Mm-hmm.
It's not enforceable. So the issue is there's a lot of places that have these sign ordinances, or these mural ordinances that are not enforceable. So if someone did something and we didn't like it, we wouldn't really have a good challenge against it.
But can we put like, so I understand that, and I know that we talked about that when we were doing the downtown zoning code. Claire might even remember this. We talked about murals, and then we're like, well, it would be kind of considered a sign, whatever. But I know that there are some communities that obviously it's private properties. These are private properties. But when it comes to a public property, but how much public property is down?
I mean, public property, we can do what we wanted. That,
We can control what that is, but
well, right.
and it's not about control. It's about making sure that
And
obviously.
for me, it's more professionally
Appropriateness.
done, and somewhat could be appropriateness depending on who the owner is of the business
Mhm.
and what they want to put up.
Yeah,
You know, it just,
they can put whatever they want, really.
right. So I think that's,
We can determine size and quantity of signs on one
Quantity,
particular building
yes.
and what size, whether it's front facing, rear facing, side facing.
15% of the wall area the sign is attached to. That's a wall sign.
You know, we regulate signs. So to not regulate something like this would kind of go against us. I mean, people could do whatever the heck they want, and it's not a good thing.
But we can't control the.
I mean,
that's
if
the
it's
problem,
something
is the
beautiful,
content.
yes,
But the issue is.
that's great, but we can't,
Choose,
Who chooses?
right.
right.
I mean, like, we
And
did
it's in the
have
eye of the
a
beholder.
almost nude girl up on the old Cuff building at one time, if you all
Oh,
recall.
I do.
So,
Well,
and that might offend some people.
Well, I mean, we already have had issues in the past in different places with yard or ornaments that some people think is trash and then other people think it's art.
Right, it's all in the eye of the beholder, but still, we have to have some regulations. Just like when you do a sign ordinance, you have regulations.
Well, yeah, I mean, right now we have regulations that say 15% of the wall in the downtown zoning district. And other than that, outside of it, it's gonna be based on size.
What's the distinction of a mural versus a sign? I mean, what's the,
We don't have it defined as a mural. We have it just a wall sign, which could be painted or fixed. That's what basically our ordinance states on it, which this is also one of the parts of the zoning code that is probably gonna be looked at in the next few years to be updated. But yeah, I mean, technically, as of right now, most of the murals would be not allowed.
You said it's 15% of the side of
Of
whatever
the
side?
space,
Of the
right?
space.
Right.
Like, so one side of a building, 15% of that.
They could have one of
So they could
those
have-
signs in the,
that's the sign ordinance.
yes.
We're talking about murals here.
It's not differentiated outside
And that's
of
how we were gonna, okay. So
it.
we
As of
already
right
have-
now, yeah, I mean, wall sign is painted, the sign applied to the building wall with paint or which has no sign structure. 15% of the wall area a sign is attached to. You get one per building.
Yeah. So do we maybe need to, so we've got a sign ordinance, but do we need to have like a subclause to that? Like, or do we already, lighted signs versus, or like,
So in this sign ordinance, like if you're looking to regulate it, right now, if you wanted to regulate it more, we'd have to amend. Otherwise, if you wanted to put something in that specifies something different for murals, that would be another type of thing,
but if we do nothing, it's 15% of
The space.
the space, but that doesn't differentiate which side of the, right?
No, but you only allow one sign. That's
One.
actually fairly common, yeah.
Per building,
Per business. Per building, per business.
per business.
Yeah.
And so the
One
question
wall
is,
sign per street frontage.
and if we're trying
Allowed
to,
on one wall without windows for a wall painted sign.
and if we're trying to also encourage like a trail going through the back end, that's where I think we're gonna start to see like, I think of New London. There's a lot of those murals that are on the back ends of the building. So what essentially what our ordinance does is prohibits anybody, so if they already have a sign out front, they can't do anything to that.
Well, I don't think so. I think if they had a wall sign out front, so you get one marquee sign per building, one awning sign per street frontage.
Is there an exemption process? A way to apply for an exemption?
No.
Could we regulate it by creating a process to do that?
Not really, because we can't,
Well, a mural, you're thinking of it in terms of a picture, it could be a message, could be both. I'm gonna say it's not impossible to do something, but it's going to be complicated. I mean, some of the murals, like, I don't know if you've ever been to, what is it, Ashland? Beautiful murals, about the history of the city of Ashland. But I mean, it could be also the Marlboro man on a horse, with a cigarette in his mouth. I think you have to like focus exactly where you want it and for what reason would you want it, because it's gonna take a great deal of thought to exclude other things that you don't want.
So if we left
It's
it as a
still a First
sign,
Amendment,
yeah.
First Amendment issue is still there.
So allowing one
Can-
sign per building, does that,
Well, a mural is usually not 15% or less of a building. A mural is usually the whole side of it, or pretty much most of the side of the building. I would like to see how some other communities have handled it, get some ideas. But I know with First Amendment concerns, probably a lot of the examples you'd be looking at would probably be violations of the First Amendment too, because all that law has really evolved over the last 5 or 6 years. If you want, we'll look for examples, give you the ups and downs of it.
but
Sure.
currently,
It'll be
because of the size?
problematic. She got an artist out there with a bucket of paint ready to go now.
We wanna make sure we don't put it in the master plan if it's something you're not gonna do too, just so you know.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed to murals, I wanna make that clear, but right now, if somebody wanted to put one up, that's considered, according to our zoning code, it's considered a sign.
If you
And they're
paint something
limit-
on a wall, it's a sign.
Yep, so currently, if somebody came to the village and said, I'd like to put up a mural, staff could say, well, it's considered a sign and this is the limits on size currently,
If
right?
you wanted to put up the Ukrainian flag on the
You
side
could
of
put
the
whatever you
building,
want.
you limited to 15%.
Mhm.
Then they wouldn't be able to put the name of the business after that. That'd be it.
You know, because if we're doing a bike trail behind these businesses, so they can put signs up saying, this is Otter Creek, and this is so-and-so,
Those are
in the back.
informational.
and that's still okay.
Yes.
If it was
We're
out-
just discussing if someone wanted to paint their whole building with a Ukrainian sign.
It would have
Is
to
that-
be, it would most likely have to be, depending on the type of sign they wanted, some of the signs in the downtown zoning code allows for one per building, but then there's some that'll be one per base,
Or
and then
entrance
there's
or whatever.
one per tenant, so there's different categories depending on the type of sign, so I would say it depends about the behind further signs.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering if it's front, side, or rear, because there's, and maybe that's something we wanna clarify.
Well, you could do it something like facing a public way. You know, if
Yeah.
there's a trail behind the building and a road in front, you could do that both front on a public way. But you're gonna still be stuck with, that 15% and how you're gonna manage that, and, whether a mural could be more than 15%.
So what are you looking for from us?
I guess I wanted some direction to see what your thoughts were, to see if you want us to come back with an ordinance specifically regulating the murals, leaving it as is with the current setup at the 15%, or just, yeah,
How many other places did you look at for their, like, ordinances on murals?
3 or 4. A lot of places are removing, so the administrators were talking, and basically there was only 3 or 4 that basically still said they still use theirs out of the ones that responded. Most of them are fairly similar. I think the one that was, I think it was Baraboo, theirs was, they considered anything that would it would be considered like a conditional use for public viewing artwork or something like that, and so it had to be an agreement between the city and the property owner to use that.
Pre-approved or blah,
Yeah,
blah, blah?
because anywhere there's art that's publicly visible, and they did some, yeah,
That's
it
gonna be
doesn't
tough.
stand up
Yeah,
though, because then
It's
you're
personal
based,
property still, but
Right, and you're judging graphics,
Yeah.
content,
What
Yeah,
makes,
you can't do that.
we can't, so, and I think that's really what most of this comes down to for most people when it comes to murals is the content.
Yeah, and if it's only this much of it versus a whole wall,
What is it, what's the difference?
I guess, but I think there's a slight difference if it's
Well, yeah,
this much, that size versus, you
yeah.
know, a wall.
Does that get you where you wanted to go? I mean, I know you wanted direction from us, but I mean, for right now, what we have is adequate enough.
For
But we just need to
50%.
educate, though, people to let them know that that is considered a sign and that they do need to get a sign, they need to get don't you have to get a permit for a sign? Yeah. I mean, and we can't control the content, go back to that, but you still have to get a permit for a sign.
Right.
And it has to follow all the other existing ordinances for signage.
I mean, I remember even putting in this ordinance that even the color scheme for downtown was like earth tone type of thing, and that preferred, yeah. And even like building material, brick or wood, and there's been steel added down there. So I mean, we really haven't enforced much, but it's not that it looks bad. It's just that when we created it, it was just, well, there was one that was,
A couple that were bad.
yeah. But, you know, to each their own. But when it comes down to what's sufficient for now, until maybe we can come up with something different, what we have would limit it to 15%.
You can't make any decisions, but.
I would like to see how like New London gets their direction. Because it's a beautiful example. I mean, that whole town is just literally full of murals.
Yeah. And I have nothing against murals.
Right.
It's just that private property owners, they can do whatever they want, and they can put whatever they want. And I get it that I believe the Wolf River Art League spearheaded a lot of that. But I also understand there's a lot of different directions too, depending on which member, it is. So.
Or Wittenberg, they have.
It also depends on the owner though, and what they want, so.
And all these things have been put up well before the last 5 or 6 years, where the Supreme Court has really restricted restrictions.
Well,
Are you getting us
I'm on the
more?
Wisconsin Downtown Action Council Board. I can just tell you we have this discussion quite regularly. And the biggest issue is no one has an issue until someone complains. And then we have to go to the attorney to make the ruling on can it stay or can it go. And so, there are a handful of us organizations, and I've talked to Nathan about this a little bit, you can put all kinds of different things, and we found different ways to have workarounds to approve it, especially in downtowns. It becomes a little bit easier because you get tied to some of your overlay things. But until someone complains, it doesn't, you have some of your restrictions on political signage and other things, but until someone complains, it's not really an issue. And that's where you don't want to make a decision now on someone complaining, and that's where we continue to struggle with these. But there are a handful of groups, and we can provide some info. I can connect some of those groups with Nathan, but your attorney's going to continue to probably tell you the exact same thing, that in the end, the minute someone makes a complaint or a comment, or you get put in a very uncomfortable situation to approving things, and then it becomes subjective versus objective. Sorry about it, I thought I'd share that.
No,
This
it's
is a
good
very common
input.
conversation. That's why I stayed, because it kind of impacts some of the stuff we're doing, so.
And Claire, you're part of the Wolf River Art League, correct?
Yeah.
And so they were a big part of New London's murals.
Yeah, they did all of them.
They did all of them. And did they go through council did they work with the city council on some of that? I guess I wasn't aware.
They planned with the city for a whole year before they painted anything, and they had an approval process for that.
So there was a lot of
It was a
lead work.
collaborative.
Very collaborative,
With the
okay.
city.
I think that's what we need to look at, is what are other people doing?
I just don't know if we can.
Technically, you can't,
Okay.
because if you deny someone and yeah, it might work with the Wolford Art League. Doesn't mean that John from down the street doesn't wanna put up a big picture of his mother on the side of the building. That, you know, I think that's where the problems come in is, yeah, just because one group is doing it in a good way, then you have someone else who's
Right.
hand painting stick figures. I mean,
There we
Yeah.
have something.
Clear.
Most people who want to do murals are probably gonna join the league because they have a pretty big presence and they provide the materials and stuff to do it. So partnering with them in some way, I think would be.
I know the Wolfer Art League, there's been a representative from there, and I have invited them to, like, when we talk about the downtown, or when we talk about the comprehensive plan, or we talk about things that are happening in the village. I think it was even a meeting where we had somebody come in and talk about the downtown and the, like, how the road was gonna be. And I haven't seen any of those members here for those particular meetings, but I've invited them, like, please come, so you just can kind of see the vision of what we're looking at for the downtown. So, hopefully maybe there's some collaboration later on.
Are we good then to move on? Okay. We'll go to 10, report of village officials. A, clerk treasurer, Jane.
My report was in the packet.
Any questions for Jane? Okay, we'll move to B, director of public works, Aaron is out. C, police chief, Chris.
My report was in the packet.
Any questions for Chris? Okay, we'll move to D, library director, Ally.
My report was in the packet. We have a library board meeting on Tuesday at 4. I do want to highlight that this is our highest summer ever with participation. From all of the archive stats that I've been able to find, this is our highest year ever in terms of participation, and I think that's saying a lot. So I'm pretty proud of it.
Sure.
Any questions?
Good job, Ally.
Any questions for Ally? Okay, then we'll move to E, attorney. Anything?
No,
Okay.
unless you want us to look into murals.
Yep, administrator.
my reports have been kind of off and on lately. I've been kind of in and out of the office. I'm trying to use up my vacation before my anniversary date, so, but should be back to normal now going forward. The trains by Wyowash Trail was getting done to this morning. Paving should be done in the next day or two if it's not done today from the afternoon since I last checked, but there is something, at some point I think we should approach the county about taking that entrance area over. The village owns a strip, that strip going before the railroad tracks, which realistically I think we should deed it over to the county, because it's not like we can sell it.
Well, it's an entrance to a county park, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I think realistically, otherwise we're gonna be on the hook sometime soon for repaving it. So I think realistically, I think we either deed it over to them or, so we'll look into that and make sure there's not some type of contract somewhere, but.
Have you gotten complaints about the railroad tracks on Nash?
I've driven over them, yeah.
Have you gotten complaints? Because I've gotten many.
I've gotten comments, some complaints, yeah.
I've gotten complaints that they are not as smooth and almost seem worse than what they were, not in the sense that there's gaping holes, but that they're bumpier. And it is interesting because I've driven over ones that
There's
are
a
completely
slight
flush.
change.
Yeah, that are
Yeah.
completely flush. So, I mean, I know there's nothing we can really do about it, but I just was curious if you all gotten calls. I got a lot.
I've heard comments, I don't think I've gotten a call directly about it, but I've gone over them a few times to test them because it's,
I've gotten calls and stopped
yeah.
by people when I've been out eating or whatever. Like,
I
what the heck?
have a call in to Dean about the other ones too, so I was gonna talk to them about that too and see if they can come out.
Is the Gibbons Road one, in the Hortonville, or is it in Hortonia?
Bertonia,
Okay.
they had to pay for it, so.
Any other questions for Nathan? Okay, we'll go to G, building permit report. It is in the packet. H, any other miscellaneous topics for future discussion?
I would like to just say that, I think that we need to have maybe a meeting prior to a detour situation, to see how we may need to look at managing that, because this is personal, but when you go by my that last with the railroad tracks being closed, the traffic that was going down Lincoln and Bath, which I fully expected to see. I mean, we know people who know this area are going to go down that road, but we put the four-way stop there for safety concerns, and the number of vehicles that did not stop is, I mean, it's still bad, but it was even worse. And people were flying down there, and that's a problem. I also know that apparently they like to test out motorcycles down Bath Street, so there's a lot of that going on. And honestly, I don't really care, but I do care in the sense that there's a lot of kids in that area. And with school out and with it raining so much and now it being sunny and nice, kids are out and they're playing. So I know that I had talked to Chris and asked for, nothing happens obviously when they're there, but maybe if we can make sure they're there, or we figure out where people are actually rerouting, because they were not using, I can tell you, none of them were going down Industrial Park.
Right.
They were all coming down Lincoln and Bath. So if we can.
So do you want this on a public safety
Yeah,
meeting?
I think
or-
just, if we can come up with a plan of action for the next time we should have a public safety meeting for, say, okay, what's our process for when this happens? Can we have a process so that we can figure out how to, because I think if once people saw the police officer there, because I saw him twice, it didn't happen then. So they start to know, oh, I'm being watched over here, and it stops.
So something for future discussion.
Yeah, just something, just so we can plan better, because I think we all know that none of them use the industrial park. None.
Are there any other topics for discussion?
I did have one question. Now that we got the signage or the speed limits changed on 9th Street going out of town, there's one right by my house, basically. That's the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit now changed, but there's all sorts of overgrowth all around it, and you can't see it.
Yep.
You notice the flags possibly, and this has been, last year was the same way, and then it got cut down nicely. But then, no, this year it's right back up again, and we just changed the sign.
Right.
So I know that's gonna be a question brought up if somebody gets a ticket.
It already has.
Oh. So my question is, who's responsible for that?
The homeowner is, we have to basically contact them. If it's a visual thing, we can handle it quicker. Otherwise, we have to send a letter for typical grass. But this, I think, since it's visual to blocking, it's in a right of way, we can have it done or have the homeowner do it.
Are we doing this for future discussion, or?
I don't think so. I think that's something you just
Okay.
handle.
If there's a traffic signal that's in the right of way that's obstructed,
Right.
the city is liable.
Right.
Okay,
Maybe it was the right time to bring it up, I apologize, but.
You're okay.
you're okay.
I think one more thing is, I saw that the no parking painting also happened. What about the line painting? When's that scheduled? Since Aaron's not here to ask.
Yeah, so the guys were going through doing the curves are a lot easier because you don't need to have traffic out of the way. So the line paintings, are you talking on Bath?
Well, I mean, we talked about the one over by the one by the school, and then we've got the one on Bath, and
So
the
the
Bath one just came to my head just
Yeah.
because of all the traffic.
The parking stalls on Oak Street in town will be probably sometime a little later, maybe in the next few weeks. The county is doing the road ones,
Okay.
because we want those to be a little more, they have to be more accurate to DOT guidelines. So I met with Michael Warman, the engineer out there 2 weeks ago. We walked through each of the areas, what we were wanting, he drew it up. We approved it, now it's just waiting until they basically come through and do it. They-
Okay, I was just curious because
No.
Aaron's not here and I would have asked him, but.
Yeah.
Okay, we will go to 11, communication and miscellaneous business. A, Black Otter Lake District news. Bob?
We just had our last meeting on Monday, and we set up a annual meeting for August 19th at 5 p.m. That'll be our annual meeting. The major thing we're discussing right now is trying to increase our revenue, our tax base, by having a Hortonville Dam watershed map put together where we can bring other people that benefit from the lake association, pay their fair share as to what they're contributing to both sediment and phosphates to the lake itself. And so that'll be brought up at the annual meeting, whether we proceed with that or not. So
You mean that line that's on our property taxes, that bold?
Mhm.
So that possibly
In-
expanding, yeah.
correct, because right now it's basically just the village proper. And if, this is just a watershed map, but
Yeah.
this is where we could go with it. And now it's just a matter of, it would definitely help. So that's it for me.
Any questions for Bob? Okay, we'll go to B, Hortonville Hortonia Fire District news. Jim?
So we met on Tuesday, last Tuesday, the 9th, and we went over the fire and EMS budget. I had Jane include the fire department budget, as well as the fire department runs in the packet. The EMS budget, EMS, they are through all of the grant money that they received. They took the remaining amount that they had and spent it on multiple training mannequins, miscellaneous equipment, trauma supplies. They are currently fully staffed at 15 people, but they're looking at going to 18. They have some that participate more than others, so even though they're fully staffed, they could still have a little bit more of a cushion. We talked about the pumper tender that the fire department needs still. The current one that they have is it's more than 25 years old, I think. So according to the regulations, they're supposed to replace it already. And they have they got a couple of quotes. They got a quote from Pierce that was about 1.18 million, and they got a quote from Marion that was very close to the same amount, 1.184 versus 1.182 million. The good thing about the couple of things that Pierce has a prepay. They both have a prepay discount. Pierce's prepaid discount is $165,000 off of the cost of the truck, and Marion's prepay is $20,000 off the cost of the truck. But there is a little caveat in that Pierce's backlog is 53 months, and Marion's backlog is 31 months for a lead time. So that's, the fire department would like to get moving on that fairly quickly. I talked to Nathan, that's gonna be at our next meeting, we're gonna be talking about it. Fire department had 59 calls, they're up a little bit. EMS is at 118. They're down a little bit, they average about 360 a year. And lastly, the fire department fundraiser is coming up July, their softball tournament's coming up July 26th and 27th.
Any questions for Jim? Okay, we'll move to C, Gold Cross Ambulance Run Report and News. It is in the packet. D, Hortonville Civic Association. Jane,
I have nothing new.
don't you have something coming up in September?
Oktoberfest, September 21st,
21st.
in the planning,
Okay,
working on it.
okay. And then 12, comments and suggestions from citizens present. And then 13, I would need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are now adjourned at 8:24.